all you beautiful people, I'm Terry, better known as Mr. Whitekeys, and today it's another beautiful day in the desert. I'm actually looking at a couple of balloons that are flying today. I would show them to you on camera, but they're too far away. But in any case, it's a beautiful day. And today we've got something really cool for you. Today we're going to show you the process for making artisan eyewear. What is it about artisan eyewear that sets it apart from mass-produced eyewear? By the way, the glasses that I'm wearing now, these are Stark Biotech Paris, designed by Philippe Stark. These are handmade in Japan from beta titanium, block titanium. So it's a very interesting design. It has a set of hinges that are very unique. The hinges are actually designed based on the human clavicle, and so they can move in just about any direction. And a lot of really detailed work here. I mean, look at these temple tips, the way that they're stretched and formed. In any case, very, very interesting piece. And I did these with a Gen S sapphire transition, which you can see here. So today we're going to show you how the sausage is made, so don't go anywhere. In this video, we're going to talk about why true artisan eyewear costs more. The process, I think, will come as a real surprise to you. So let's get into it. Have you ever wondered how a beautiful handcrafted pair of artisan glasses comes to life? Today, we're going behind the scenes of the meticulous process that turns raw acetate and skilled craftsmanship into the eyewear that you wear. From hand-drawn sketches to final polish, this is how artisan eyewear is made. Now, I realize this is kind of a long video, so one of the things that I've done is I've broken it up into 9 sections called segments. Segment 1 is concept and design. Segment 2 is acetate preparation, which includes producing the acetate, producing all of the laminates. Segment 3 is shaping the frame. In segment 4, we'll talk about the hardware and the structural work. In segment 5, we'll talk about polishing and finishing. In segment 6, we'll focus on temple arms and the core wire. In segment 7, we'll talk about alignment and assembly. In segment 8, we'll talk about final finishing and quality control. And finally, in segment 9, we'll talk about lenses and final assembly. So this is segment 1, concept and design. The first thing we'll talk about is the sketch. Every journey begins with an idea. Most artisan eyewear designers still start old school by sketching their concept by hand. Using pencil and colored markers, the artist refines the shape, the thickness, the style. Once the design is set, they pick Pantone colors to determine exactly how the acetate should look. It's an essential step because acetate manufacturers will match to those Pantone values to produce the exact hues and laminations. So Shane Baum is the founder and designer for Leisure Society, and he is one of those old school artists. He has been inducted into the Eyewear Designer Hall of Fame, and he still designs eyewear by hand using pencil sketch. From there, they create a technical drawing and a CAD/CAM model. From sketch to precision, designers port their hand drawings into a 3D computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing program. Here, they build a fully dimensioned model, defining lens heights, bridge sizes, thickness, proportions. These CAD/CAM models form the blueprints. These blueprints allow you to validate proportions and ergonomics. They allow you to generate the multiple technical drawings, the front, the side, the top views that are used by manufacturers. And they also actually drive the CNC milling machines for production of frame fronts and temple arms. So segment 2 is acetate preparation. Let's talk about acetate production and lamination. Next, we choose the acetate. Acetate comes in thick sheets or blocks, and for artisan frames, layering is a key technique. By stacking different colored acetate sheets, manufacturers can create marble, tortoise, or gradient effect, the kind of depth and patterning that gives handcrafted frames their character. These sheets are pressed together under heat and pressure to form solid blocks that will later be milled. So the acetate that's typically used for artisan eyewear is made from a cotton extrusion process. One of the things that does is it makes it feel more organic on the skin. But another ingredient that is a necessary evil is what we call plasticizer. And plasticizer is a petroleum-based product. It allows the acetate to be molded. So the objective is to use the least amount of plasticizer as you can possibly use so that most of the acetate is actually, you're feeling sort of the cotton instead of feeling like a plastic toy. So a lot of the designers in Europe that make mass-produced eyewear use about 70% plasticizer. That's one of the reasons why their glasses feel like a toy sitting on your face. However, Mazzucchelli, which was founded in 1849, they make acetate for eyewear companies all around the world, in Brazil, in Japan, in China, in Thailand, and in other places. So this allows them to take advantage of economies of scale, but it's also one of the reasons why you'll see similar colorways across a number of different eyewear designers, because a lot of them are getting their acetate from the same manufacturer. Eyewear designers that make mass-produced eyewear in Europe typically use about 70% plasticizer. Mazzucchelli, on the other hand, uses about 40% plasticizer, which is why it feels more organic on the face. Japanese acetate, on the other hand, is on a whole nother level. Japanese acetate typically uses between 23 to 26% plasticizer, which is the least that you can get away with and still be able to mold the acetate into the shapes that you want to mold it into. So that is one of the things that contributes to the purported longevity of Japanese eyewear, is the fact that they use so much less plasticizer, and part of it also has to do with the curing process, which we'll also talk about. So Masunaga, which was founded in 1905, produces their own acetate. In fact, they make everything in eyewear from beginning to end, from the acetate and also from the precious metals all the way through to the finished eyeglasses. So that's kind of unusual. A lot of times companies will use different contractors and different companies for different parts of the process where they specialize in that. Masunaga, they do everything in-house. One of the main manufacturers of acetate in Japan is Takiron, and they also use about 23 to 26% plasticizer, similar to Masunaga. Sabai, located in Fukui Prefecture in Japan, is the eyewear capital of the world, and that's where Takiron, Masunaga, Matsuda make their eyewear. Curing and stabilizing the acetate. Once laminated, the acetate blocks need to cure. This means aging them in a controlled environment with the right temperature and humidity so that any residual solvents evaporate and moisture is driven out. This step is critical. Without it, the acetate can warp or crack later. Some high-quality manufacturers even cure for weeks, ensuring stability and longevity. And increasingly, artisan brands are using more sustainable acetate. For example, Mazzucchelli has partnered with Eastman to produce Acetate Renew, made from recycled content. Segment 3, shaping the frame. Acetate sheets are then cut into strips that match the size that's required for the frame that they're making. Then each strip is planed to the width that's required for the eyewear. These planed strips are then cut into tablets that match the dimensions of the frame front. Let's talk about cutting the acetate. With the cured acetate ready, we move on to cutting. Depending on the design, artisans may use CNC milling machines for speed and repeatability, or manual saws for custom or limited edition frames. If a design is laminated using multiple layers, they carefully position each piece to maximize pattern alignment. Heat is often applied to soften the acetate, making cutting and shaping more precise and reducing the risk of cracking. Nose pad and bridge forming. To get a comfortable nose fit, a small acetate block is glued on where the nose pads will sit. This adds depth and structure. Then, depending on the bridge style, whether it's a saddle bridge or a keyhole bridge, etc., the frame front is heated and pressed into a mold that creates the bridge shape. Over time, some artisans even design bespoke molds for particular frame models to fine-tune that comfort. For instance, both Masunaga and T. Henry are known for their impeccable bridge fits. CNC programming. The 3D computer-aided design model is now translated into tool paths. Experts program the CNC milling machine, choosing the right milling tools and holders, setting speeds, feed rates. Everything must be optimized for acetate milling. This programming ensures the frame front and temples will be carved with precision. Tool paths is another important topic. So rather than just cutting the eye holes as an example, you define the tool path so that it goes first to cut the eye hole, but then a second pass to go around to make sure that the edges on the inside of the eye hole, or the rim wire essentially is what we call it, even though it's acetate, has no rough edges. And there are similar details that you have to define in terms of the tool path as you go around the outside of the shape of the frame as well. Some CNC machines can actually do some of the beveling, although it's really just starting the beveling work, because the majority of the beveling work requires, again, months of polishing and forming and shaping. CNC milling. Here's where the block starts turning into a frame. First, the eye holes are milled. Then, bespoke grips, often called expandable mushrooms, clamp onto them and hold them onto the piece firmly. The outer shape gets cut, and if the design calls for bevels or extra details, those are added. After that, artisans will take over to refine the shape by hand. So let's talk about CNC milling. CNC milling is the beginning of the process and basically gives you the rough shape of the frame front based on the design that you program into it from the computer-aided design software. But this really is just the beginning. There's so much extra work that has to be done in terms of shaping and rounding the frame. Otherwise, the frame would just end up being flat with sharp edges. The final shape emerges as a result of months of polishing and shaping and shining and bringing out the true luster of an artisan frame. Segment 4, hardware and structural work. A key ingredient in artisan eyewear is the hardware. And in artisan eyewear, the hardware often includes titanium parts, but a lot of times they'll include gold on titanium or sterling silver on titanium or other materials. This is important in terms of the hinges, the hinge plates, the core wires, the rim wire, and other visible parts that you see. A lot of times they'll also add temple lug to the end of the temples to add a bit of visual interest. Another thing that sets artisan eyewear apart from mass-produced eyewear is the process that they use to fuse the gold or silver onto the titanium. A lot of mass-produced eyewear uses things like stainless steel, and they also use a process that is electroplating. And electroplating results in a very thin layer. As an example, if you're electroplating gold onto stainless steel, it results in a very thin layer, about 0.03 microns. On the other hand, with artisan eyewear, they use a different process. They use physical vapor deposition ion plating, and that results in a finish that is up to 5 microns thick. So it's about 10 times thicker than what you get with mass-produced eyewear. This finish is about 8 times more wear resistant than what you get with electroplating. So next up, hinges. High-end artisan eyewear often uses riveted hinges or decorative torque screws. For rivets, the CNC mill carves a hinge grave, a little recess, and then a pin is inserted and domed to secure it. For sunken hinges, the hinge is heated and embedded into the acetate for a clean, flush finish. So we're talking about hinges. I wanted to give you an example. So this is a pair of Masanagas that I have. I have several pairs, but let's take a look at the Masanagas for a moment. So you can see the hinges in the Masunaga. Hopefully you can see the hinges. But one of the things that might not be obvious, there's a little bit of a cant here. So the edges of the frame are canted outward. So the temple arms are subsequently also canted outward. And not only is that an interesting design and makes for an interesting and flattering shape for the frame front, but it also makes for a much more comfortable, it's one of the reasons why these Masunaga 100s are one of the most comfortable pairs of eyewear that I've ever owned. And it's also why I own several of them. The reason is because if you sort of feel behind your ear at the shape of your head, it also sort of cants outward. And so when they bend the temple arms outward, or they don't actually bend them outward, they attach to the frame front at a bit of an angle. That angle matches what you have behind your ears, which is one of the reasons why it makes it more comfortable. The problem is this introduces some complexity in terms of the design. So let's talk about that for a moment. So one of the things you have to do to make this work is you have to bend the charniers in such a way that even though the temple arms are canted outward, when you close the temple arm, it closes straight like this. So there's a bit of engineering complexity involved in that. And these are all the types of things that you really have to consider when designing the hinges and then attaching the hinges to the frame front and subsequently to the temple arms. Let's go ahead and put the Masunagas back. Setting the base curve. Human heads are not flat. To fit comfortably, frames need a base curve. Artisans heat the frame front, then bend it to a specified curve, commonly 2, 4, or 6. Premium makers, like some Japanese artisans, often prefer a lower base curve, which enhances the way the acetate reflects light and gives that refined premium look. So something about the base curve. The flatter the base curve, and this is again sort of the Japanese style. The flatter the base curve, what it does is it allows you to have more reflections off of the front of the glasses. So when you finish sort of that luster, you can see the reflections off of the different curves and bevels on the eyewear. So the flatter the curve, the more the eyewear tends to shine, and that is that Artisan Eyewear difference. The other advantage of having a flatter base curve is that you can accommodate thicker prescriptions for lenses. High base curves are reserved for sports eyeglasses and sort of that wraparound type of eyeglasses that you get. These are with base curves of 6 or more. Segment 5, polishing and finishing. Tumbling preparation. Before tumbling, the frame fronts are cleaned and prepped. Artisans often mask delicate parts like hinges with plastic covers to protect them during the tumbling process. Multi-stage tumbling. This is where the hand machining marks are smoothed out. Tumbling is done in stages. Rough media like wood chips and pumice, then successively finer media, and finally specialized polishing media, often beechwood chips with polishing cream. Hours in total. After each tumble, the frames are washed, polished, and moved to the next stage. So let's talk a little bit more about tumbling. The tumbling process used at Masunaga, as an example, is a 5-stage process. So they go through 5 different tumblers with different types of material. They start off with pumice and bamboo chips and then move to successively finer materials and different abrasive creams and things like that. Each of the stages includes about 20 hours of tumbling, following which they have to be polished and bathed and washed, and then they go back into the tumbler a second time for another 20 hours. Imagine doing this now 5 different times. That's one of the reasons why just the tumbling process alone at Masunaga takes weeks to complete before the polishing process, which takes months to complete, even begins. Ultrasonic cleaning. Once tumbled, the frames go into an ultrasonic cleaning bath, usually in warm water, to remove any residual polishing agents or debris, then air dried meticulously. Segment 6, temple arms, core wire. Cutting temple arms. The temple arms are carved next. This can start with CNC milling using guides from a 3D model, or they can be done entirely by hand for more bespoke design. Shooting the core wire. A critical step, reinforcing the temple with a core wire, usually made of Japanese beta titanium. The temple is heated, then the core wire is inserted or shot into it. This gives the arm structure, memory, and allows for adjustability over time. Very important for comfort and longevity. This wire is sometimes called the soul of the frame. So Artisan Eyewear typically uses titanium core wire. They use titanium parts rather than stainless steel. One of the reasons for that is it's a lot lighter and it's a lot more flexible. And this is one of the things that makes a difference because the eyewear itself becomes lighter and easier to wear, more comfortable for long-term wear on the face. Now, the disadvantage of working with titanium is trying to shoot a titanium core wire that's made from Japanese beta titanium is an absolute nightmare. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of companies won't use titanium. They'll use stainless steel instead, because a lot of times when you try to shoot the titanium, it ends up failing. You end up throwing parts away. You end up losing the temple as well as the core wire, and you have to start over again. The other thing is that the core wire that you use in Artisan Eyewear a lot of times has gold plating or silver plating, and then it has this incredible coining work that they put a lot of time and energy into. And if one of those fails, right, you end up losing the whole thing and you end up losing lots and lots of hours of work. Shaping and finalizing temple arms. After the wire is inserted, the temple shape often changes slightly. A master artisan will hand grind and carve to refine the 3D form. Then edge smoothing is done with grinding wheels. This stage ensures the arms feel sculpted, balanced, and true to the design. So when we're talking about balancing, balance is an incredibly important part of Artisan Eyewear. And one of the best ways to achieve a balanced pair of eyewear is through the temple arms. So with the temple arms, if you sculpt the temple arms in sort of a 3D as opposed to just a simple 2D fashion where it's a uniform shape and width all the way to the end of the temple arm, you can actually place more of the weight behind the ear such that the eyewear doesn't feel front heavy. It doesn't feel like it's going to slide down your nose. So balance is a very important part of the artisan eyewear process, and one of the keys to achieving that balance is shaping the temple arms in a complex three-dimensional pattern. Installing hinges on temple arms. Just like the frame front, the temple hinge gets installed with precision. If there are rivets or decorative screws, the artisan carefully aligns and inserts them. Too much force, and the acetate can ripple. Too little, and there will be a gap. So the fit must be perfect. Embossing and lettering. For more premium or limited edition frames, artisans will mill a shallow groove, a grave if you will, into the temple for decorative lettering and logos. Then, thin foil, usually gold or silver, something like that, some precious metal, is laser cut, placed into the grave, and then sealed with rosin. After drying, the surface is sanded to bring out the detail. Polishing and tumbling temples. The temple arms go through the same tumbling and polishing regimens as the frame front. Rough, medium, and fine stages, followed by hand polishing to ensure a consistent finish. This gives the arm the same luxurious feel as the rest of the frame. Segment 7. Alignment and assembly. Miter and panoscopic angle. To make sure the glasses sit correctly on the face, the temples must be cut at the right angle, called the panoscopic tilt, which is usually between 5 or 7 degrees. This panoscopic tilt exists because your eye rotates this way, and therefore the eyeglass needs to be tilted inward toward the cheek in order for the eyes to be able to continue to look through the glass at the correct angle. Master craftsmen carefully miter or cut at an angle the temple end so that they meet the frame front neatly and at the correct angle. Some need to be angled outward. That requires real skill to bend and align without compromising alignment when the frames close. An example of this is the Masunaga 100. The sides of the frame, instead of being straight like these, actually are canted outward a bit because this part is canted outward a bit. And so that adds an additional level of complexity to mitering the temple arms. Joining hinges. Now the hinges are finally joined. The craftsman drills, inserts pins or screws, and ensures smooth movement. Everything is tested. You want no wobble, just smooth, reliable operation. Bending the temple arms. Hockey stick temples, such as these, which are the standard type of temple arm, are bent by hand for a comfortable fit. Using a custom mold for each frame model, the artisan heats the temple, bends it to the frame, and lets it cool so it holds its curve, but still retains adjustability because of the core wire. Segment 8. Final finishing and quality control. Hand polishing. This is perhaps the most labor-intensive part of the whole process, and that's hand polishing. For high-end artisan eyewear, this can literally take months. Craftsmen sit in front of a sequence of polished wheels, each with its own agent, refining every curve, every edge. Over-polishing is a real risk. Acetate is soft, and a misstep could ruin the shape. That's why expert hands are irreplaceable. In artisan eyewear, the polishing step is really the long pole in the tent. So this part of the process can take weeks, or in the case of Masunaga, months. So there are different artisans that specialize in each phase of the polishing. There's the rough polishing, which is where the process begins, and then there are subsequent phases of polishing that uses different types of wheels, different type of material that's on the wheel, different type of abrasive compound that's used on the wheel, and a different technique. And each artisan specializes in that phase of the polishing. The eyewear then moves sort of from artisan to artisan, from station to station for each of these successive stages of the polishing. And this, again, can take months to complete. Flattening the temple front junction. In premium frames, the seam where the temple meets the frame front is almost invisible. The artisan polishes so precisely that when you run your finger along that joint, you shouldn't feel a seam. When you open the temple arms to put your glasses on, you should not be able to tell where the seam even is. It should literally become invisible. That's the hallmark of true craftsmanship. Smoothing and surface refinement. After the major polishing, artisans carefully inspect and smooth any micro imperfections, small bumps, scratches, or rough spots that the tumbler or machine or artisan may have missed. Final shine and luster. Now comes the signature glossy shine, or the chosen finish. More polished wheels, more compound, and careful, consistent technique, all to bring out the depth and luster of the acetate. Each frame is rechecked for even finish, symmetry, and balance. Now when we finally get to the final shine and luster step, this is a step that can only be performed by an artisan that has 10 years or more of experience, that is a master craftsman. So this phase of the process is reserved for the best of the best, because it's the most important part of the process. Something that's really interesting with Goatee of Switzerland is that the polishing process is so important, and these artisans are so proud of the work that they do, that they actually engrave the name of the polisher into the temple arm on Goatee of Switzerland eyewear. So typically, someone that's doing the polishing will wear gloves to protect their hands from the abrasion of the wheel as they're polishing. But a lot of Japanese master craftsmen don't use the gloves. And the disadvantage of this is they end up with hands that are black. But they wear this sort of like a badge of honor, because one of the things they want to be able to do is they want to be able to feel the frame as they're sort of progressing through the shaping and polishing of the frame, and have that sort of tactile sense of what they're doing and really putting their heart and soul into the art of making the eyewear. So an important concept to really understand handmade Japanese artisan eyewear is the concept of monosukuri. The word literally means making things, but it means a lot more than that. It embodies the spirit, the philosophy, and the pride of craftsmanship. Monosukuri is the belief that the object carries the care, precision, and craftsmanship of the master craftsman. It literally embodies the soul of the master craftsman itself. This quality is not an accident, but the result of patience and precision. Laser detailing. For serial numbers, model codes, and branding, artisans etch details into the temples using a laser. Then they inlay gold or silver ink and polish it away until the lettering gleams. On limited editions, you might even see serial numbering, like piece 148 of 149. So some of the details that get laser etched onto the temple arm include the model number, the eye size, the bridge width, the length of the temple arms. In rare cases, they'll also include the width of the frame front. Another thing that they will engrave into the temple arm is the serial numbers. So for instance, if it's a limited collection, the T. Henry Daytonas that I have are number 148 of 149 that were ever made. So another thing that Masunaga does, and a number of other eyewear manufacturers do as well, is engrave the color and color number into the temple arm, near the end of the temple arm. Segment 9, lenses and final assembly. Lens manufacturing. For optical frames, lens manufacturers like Zeiss produce the clear lenses. For sunglasses, the process is more complex. Layers of tints, coatings, polarizers, UV filters. Each step adds depth, protection, and style. So in terms of lens manufacturing, when we talk about lenses that don't have a prescription, we refer to those as plano lenses. Certainly with respect to sunglasses, there are a number of layers, a number of different coatings. The process is incredibly complex to get the result that you see with world-class lens makers like Maui Jim. But similarly, for optical lenses, there is quite a bit of complexity as well. So when we choose the tints, that's part of the process. Usually that happens at the end of the manufacturing process where the lenses are dipped. When you do a double gradient tint, you not only have to dip the lens, but then you have to turn it at exactly a 90-degree or 180-degree angle and dip it in such a way that the two gradients line up perfectly. And this is a bit of a trick. Then you have other complexities that are inherent in making a freeform lens, which has a much higher resolution of augmentation than you would find in a blank lens that they use off the shelf that's not a freeform lens. lens, those lenses tend to be cheaper. The vision that you get with a freeform lens is next level. So in addition to the tints, we can also talk about flash mirrors or mirrors that can be added to the front of the lens. The flash mirror is a lighter sort of mirror than you would find typically in sunglasses, which often use mirrors themselves. So you have flash mirrors, you have the tints, single gradient, double gradient, or maybe a solid tint. You also have anti-reflective coating, and there are different types of coatings that get applied to lenses. So with anti-reflective coating, you want to reduce the reflections off of the front and the back surface of the lens so that you can see your eyes better. But another thing that often gets added to anti-reflective coating is a hydrophobic coating as well as an oleophobic coating. So the hydrophobic coating allows water to sort of bead off of the lens much more easily, and the oleophobic coating makes the lenses much easier to clean. But all of this takes time, and there are a number of layers, there are a number of processes. These processes often take weeks. So making an optical lens can be as complex as making a sunglass lens. So let's talk about glazing. Glazing is the process by which you take the lens that comes from the lab, which resembles a hockey puck, and you fit it into the actual glasses in which you're going to insert them. So you need to apply a block to the lens so that the lens is properly centered. Then you apply a chuck to the lens, you put it into the machine, it edges the lens to fit the internal parameters of the rim wire itself, and then you apply a groove that will hold it into the rim wire. After that, you remove the block, and then you insert the lens. To insert the lenses, artisans gently heat the frame rim so it expands, insert the lens, and let the rim cool so it contracts and holds the lens securely, a classic heat-end glazing method. Then the glasses are thoroughly cleaned by hand. Balancing and alignment. Before the frames are finished, a master craftsman checks balance. Do both temples and the frame front touch a flat surface evenly? Are they symmetric? Does everything align with the original blueprint? These checks ensure wearability and high quality. So one of the problems with mass-produced frames is a lot of times you end up getting frames that are not properly aligned and not properly balanced. That simply can't happen with Artisan Eyewear. So the balancing and alignment step is a critical success factor with Artisan Eyewear. Balancing is key because a lot of times if you're making, for example, a frame that includes a lot of thick acetate, which is very popular in 2025, you want the frames to feel light on the face. And the only way to achieve that is through proper balance. So you have to get an appropriate amount of the weight behind the ear, and the rest of it has to be balanced so that you can balance the frames this way. And that's what makes the frames feel incredibly light on the face and suitable for long-term wear. Final quality inspection. Every pair goes through a rigorous final inspection. Craftsmen inspect for surface flaws, hinge integrity, symmetry, and polish. They also run functional stress tests, hinge cycling, frame bending, to make sure each frame meets the highest standards. Only when a frame passes all these checks is it cleaned, packaged, and shipped. So for the inspection process, this is part of the process that doesn't just happen at the end. Throughout the process, once the hinges are attached, as an example, a hinge integrity test takes place where a machine will then open and close the hinges thousands and thousands of times over the course of something like 72 hours to ensure that the hinges work as advertised and that there are no defects with the hinges. If they do find a defects with the hinges, they throw them away and start over. Another thing that gets tested is the integrity of the frame front. So one of the things they do with the frame front is they will actually move the frame front back and forth. They'll bend the frame front like this. They'll have a machine do that thousands and thousands of times over the course of something like 72 hours. If the frame front then breaks, they have to throw it away and start over. Segment 10, sustainability and modern innovations. Many modern artisan eyewear brands are also embracing sustainability. For instance, Matsukeli now produces acetate made from acetate renew or bio-based and partially recycled materials. This allows for premium quality and craftsmanship while reducing environmental impact, marrying tradition and innovation in a beautiful and conscious way. So there you have it. From pencil sketch to finished masterpiece, Artisan Eyewear represents a stunning blend of art, engineering, and handcraft. Every pair tells a story, not just of design, but of patience, precision, and passion. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes journey, like, subscribe, and comment below with what surprised you most, or what you'd like to see in the next world of eyewear. Thanks for watching. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. That's all I've got for you today, and I'll see you in the next video.